Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition. That is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, and it is great to be here with all of you great and amazing, wonderful listeners and viewers, I guess, as well. Brought to you, of course, by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Lots of stuff to do on the show today. Zach, good afternoon. How are we doing today?
Doing good. I was on 102.5 this morning. With Robbie and Adam Vingen filling in. And just want to say that we are now calling, I'm starting the trend, we are calling OTAs a minicamp because of the Combine being called the Underwear Olympics. OTAs and minicamps are pajama practices.
Pajama practices. Well, the last practice the media saw this past week on Tuesday was absolutely a pajama walkthrough. There's no question about that. Except for the defensive huddle breaking was very intense. There was a lot of cussing and antagonism, and then it got a little heated in red zone. It was fun. It was fun to watch, but it was definitely a bunch of young players and a bunch of backups. So we're going to get to sort of an all-encompassing conversation about all these different pajama practices, rookie mini camp, mandatory mini camp, OTAs, all this sort of like the last 4.5 weeks or so. I think I missed one practice the last week of May. I think there was one practice there that the media was able to go to that I missed. Otherwise, I went to every single one. And what I found myself doing on Tuesday, and we'll get to some of the things we saw on Tuesday, but I sort of felt myself stepping back and having conversations with folks sort of big picture about the summer. And so I thought I sort of settled on 2 or 3 things that I feel like this is exactly what I learned this last month and a half about the Tennessee Titans. I don't know if it means success or failure in any one area, but I thought these are the 2 or 3 things that I definitively learned that I think are the biggest parts of being a Titans fan over the last few weeks. I asked you to come up with your list as well. So we're going to run through our list of the things that we feel like we learned this summer about the Tennessee Titans that are now, of course, on break, heading it before training camp starts in a few weeks. Also, and I floated this to you, and I'm always like, what's he going to do? Is he going to poo-poo my idea, or is he going to be all on board with it? I never know. And I had I think there's a storyline, and this is partly our fault too, that literally no one is talking about. A major storyline that came up at practice this week with a variety of people that I started thinking about and toying with, and I think is going to be a big part of the Titans and every other team in the NFL, and we did not talk about it. And so we're going to get to that today on the show as well. So
it's funny. So Adam asked on the spot, the last question was like, what is a storyline that you don't think is getting enough coverage? And I wasn't really expecting that. So I didn't, have really an answer. I joked that it was obviously that nobody talks about Brian and Bill Callahan being related. Very undercovered. But after I hung up, I gave some bullshit answer I wasn't really happy with. And after I hung up, I literally thought about this topic. And I was like, damn, that would have been it. That should have been it.
That's why you saved it for the real show here.
Yeah, there you go. I did promote a football show, so there you go.
Not that Predators reporter filling in for Rexro. No. Adam's great. We love Adam and Robbie and all those guys. So, all right. So we're going to get to the big takeaways, overarching takeaways from the month and a half of practice, and then the most underrated storyline in Titans camp that we've not talked about. But before we do, we got to tell you about our wonderful and amazing friends, of course, the Kingston Group, BuildKG.com. This is a company owned by technically a former SEC football player who is from Nashville, who was born and raised in Nashville, who played college football in Nashville, and is now running a company helping you manage your home in Nashville. And that is what we're all about, is providing nutritional content for people in Nashville. And our partners are about providing great services to people in Nashville. The Kingston Group is a part of that list. So make sure you remember the name. BuildKG.com is the website. Kingston Group is the name. All you got to do is remember that. And, of course, Sinkers Beverages, their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages up in Hendersonville. They've got all kinds of stuff going on each and every week. I was told if you are stocking up on Bonnaroo supplies, or their featured beverages of the week this week, some chillable reds, Zach. Some chillable reds. So they always have deals in there. There's always specials. They always drop some allocations on Friday. So if you want to pop in, tomorrow's a perfect time to do it. Again, if you're going to Bonnaroo this weekend, stock up on some supplies. They got all kinds of selection from everywhere, but they're always doing something to be better than the next guy. And it's why they're the 3-time liquor store of the year in Nashville. So Sinkers Beverages, make sure you join the in crowd. They're going to have some special events coming up that you are only eligible for if you are part of the in crowd. And, of course, Bluegrass Beverages, the Bob program, the best of Bluegrass. Make sure you sign up for that in Bluegrass in Hendersonville. proud sponsor of Football and Other F Words. And of course, they'll have some events coming up as well. Again, only if you're in the sort of loyalty program, because they want to reward people that are loyal to them. So you guys should be loyal to them as well. All right. So, bro, Stoney, good to see you. In the comments already, Chillable Red is what I named my what?
PP, his penis.
Guy, his penis. Chillable Red. All right. Sometimes I need to read the comments before I just put them up on the screen, Zach, is what I think I need to do sometimes. So you're welcome, Stoney. You spammed pretty hard there. Okay. So first of all, quickly reacting to Tuesday, and there's not a lot to say. It was Levis was out there getting a lot of reps with young players, and the thing that I took away from Tuesday practice this week was all of the young people, all of the young players, all the rookies, all the second-year players, all the third-year players. They all got a ton of work with the coaching staff. There was a lot of teaching technique. There was a lot of teaching, like, here's how I want you to run this route. Here's how I want you to set this guy up. And it was none of the veterans really were there at all. But a lot of guys got opportunities to get hands-on coaching from the coaching staff. A large chunk, Zach, of these players who have no chance to make the roster. And then there's like that middle ground group of people that might make the roster. And then there's some rookies that got drafted that probably will make the roster. But they all got extra time with the coaches this week because none of the veterans were around except for basically Will Levis.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I was kind of surprised they even had the practices this week. I'm not surprised they canceled pretty much the last day for a team building exercise or whatever.
Standard.
But it was voluntaries, and you've already gone through a bunch of voluntary work. You've already done your OTAs, your mini camps, and all this stuff. So most of these vets have done the 90% of the pajama practices. So, I wasn't really that surprised. I was talking about it today, and people were like, what's your take on Tavondre Sweat missing all this stuff? I don't really have a concern unless Tavondre Sweat has let this injury hamper his ability to do other things, and he shows up after this 5 week break. He shows up and he's like 390 pounds again. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. But again, I mean, he has invited this concern into the analysis from his past and everything.
True.
But at this point, like, I'm not surprised that any of these guys missed. And I guess Jeffrey Simmons is injured is what people are saying now. I haven't heard that. I just saw it on a tweet, so I don't know if that's true or not. But, who cares?
Not hearing a lot of chatter about that. Tajay was there. Absolutely, Tajay was there. But again, like, even on Tuesday, it was very light work for the running backs. But you're right. I'm sort of exaggerating when I say the only guy who is a starter that was there was Will Levis. The offensive line was mostly there, right? Like Latham, Skaronski, Cushenberry, all the guys were there. Ojukwu, Charles, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot of everybody was there. I mean, there was. It was like, you're not going to be throwing the ball to DeAndre Hopkins in this week of practice. Like, you don't need L'Jarius Sneed out there running press coverage. Like, that's just not, you don't need that stuff. And here's the other thing we don't know is how much any of these guys participated in things that were not viewable by the media. So it's not worth overreacting about at all. I think again, my biggest takeaway is a lot of young players. Like, if you're a player, I'm trying to think of a guy that I would put in this book. Like, if you're Jabari Small or Dylan Johnson, you probably aren't going to make the team. Maybe you have an outside chance, but getting time with the offense, with Bill Callahan, with the offensive line, with Will Levis, with Brian Callahan, with Nick Holes, with the offensive or with the running backs coach, and getting that hands-on work, because you're getting more reps than you need to give Tony Pollard, then that's a good thing. That benefits the depth of the roster and sort of it helps everybody. So I think it's a positive. I think Sweat is also a part of some PTSD with the last guy that was a first-round pick who, hey, is he in shape? Is he in shape? Is he in shape? Traylon Burks.
Maybe even the last 3 guys. Would you really?
Yeah, if you put Wilson in there.
But to be fair, second-round picks. He's not first-round pick.
That's true. But that's true. A high-level guy. That's a good point. A high-level top 40 player who's supposed to be a premier player on the team from a draft pick standpoint. I think there's PTSD, and it's not fair to Tavondre Sweat because they're not related, but it is going to be, Titans fans are going to look at Isaiah Wilson and Traylon Burks and go, here we go again. And it just is what it is. There's nothing we can do about that. So,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I want to get to my first number one big takeaway from the entire 4 months, and we'll kind of go back and forth here on this. My number one is that I think there are some pretty obvious discernible differences in some young players that I think are putting themselves in a position to be successful this year. It doesn't mean they're going to turn any of the things we saw this month into actual success, but I think they've put themselves in a position to be successful with things like leadership, maturity, development, physicality, just being a professional adult football player. And 3 names come to mind in particular that I think that have clearly done that, either through the offseason and then through this last month and a half. And almost all of them are on offense. And that is Josh Wiley, Peter Skoronski, and Tajay Spears. I think in particular, those 3. There's some other names we could lump into this group. But those 3 guys, stepping back from the entire month of practice, Zach, and just sort of cataloging everything you've seen, Tajay Spears has put himself in a position to be ready to step into a starting role should they need him to, or 1A, 1B, or whatever. I think Peter Skoronski is giving himself an opportunity to be an absolute starting top-level left guard in the NFL. And I think Josh Wiley has done an incredible job getting himself ready to push for tight end 1 status. Like vocally on the field, leading, physically, they're more prepared, they're more focused. I think those 3, there's some others we can put in here, but I think there are some really good developments with some of the younger core pieces on the offense in particular that, again, I think have put themselves in a situation to enter camp to maximize their opportunities. And I think that's a really good development for the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, you need your young guys to start stepping up, the guys that you draft in draft classes, and that's been a real big issue for the Tennessee Titans, mainly due to John Robinson's poor drafting. That at the end of the day, that's what we've talked about, is that nobody has been developed and nobody has really caught on from those draft classes. And that's why this particular team has seen so much turnover and so much turmoil the last 2 seasons, is because none of the young guys really stepped up and everything. And there's a lot to that too. But we saw Tajay Spears start stepping into this role towards the back half of last year. We know that Skoronski would have had a better season had it not been for an appendectomy and maybe 2 guys around him that were Aaron Brewer and Andre Dillard, Jalen Duncan, and whoever else they threw over on the left tackle side. And if he had an actual coach, right? I mean, we talk about, the effect of Bill Callahan, but the effect of Jason Hoteling is just a different effect in the wrong direction. And he just wasn't ready. And that you saw that there was miscommunication, not being able to recognize to pick up stunts and who was picking up what. It just seemed a very disjointed effort all on that offensive line. So I'm not surprised. Skoronski has to be the guy. Like we talked about this yesterday on Football and Other Efforts, me and Stoney, when we were previewing in depth the offensive line. And one of the topics was, it's kind of like Will Levis for me. Skoronski has to show it. Now it's a little bit more for me. I'd say that Skoronski has to show it because he's a 1st round pick. He was the best. He was considered the best offensive lineman by a wide margin last year in that draft class. Obviously, everybody talked about him being a tackle at some point, but he was always, for the most part, I think most people thought Pro Bowl tackle, All-Pro guard. And I'm not saying he has to be an All-Pro or Pro Bowler this year, but we have to see a considerable step up in ability on the field. And also for the fact that they're really going to need him, J.C. Latham, and Lloyd Cushenberry to carry a heavy burden, and he has to live up to that 11th overall draft pick status because he was drafted as a guard.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, when you're drafting a guard at 11, there are high aspirations from the team, high expectations, and the Tennessee Titans fan base and the media and the staff have to remember to keep holding him to that expectation. So again, he doesn't have to be an All-Pro or Pro Bowler, but you would like to see him take a considerable leap forward. And I think he's done a lot to, like you said, to set himself up in a position to prove that up on the field. And we've talked about Josh Wiley now for it feels like 2 or 3 weeks, probably even longer, that he is pushing for that tight end 1 spot. It seems like the Titans are promoting him on their socials as the tight end 1 at this point.
He's different. He's
just
very
a different.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a different looking player and all that kind of stuff. So at this point, I think that you pick 3, and it ties into my pick for the top. Go ahead.
Let me go one more comment to kind of finish this part of it, which is the other thing about this, and this will be a perfect segue into your number 1. The other thing is I'm curious if there is behind the scenes, and I think there is far more clarity with their roles coming into the season. Maybe not with Skoronski. They knew he's probably going to be the left guard. But like even when he gets drafted, though, he's a tackle for almost all of his college career. And so maybe he's coming into camp thinking like, well, what am I going to be? Right? Like maybe there's some element of that. Tajay Spears knew he was a backup. Now he's got clarity in his role. Josh Wiley knew he was a backup last year. Now he's got more clarity in his role. I would assume on the back end. They've probably had conversations about what they're going to be. And I think this will lead right into one of the players you might be mentioning here, who I think actually will benefit from some clarity in his role. But I think that's a part of this. Not only did they do the work, but there's also clarity in what they're going to be asked to do for the team, which is also good.
There's a stark difference between the 2022 draft class and 2023 draft class, and that's kind of where I've landed as my most important takeaway. Obviously, Roger McCreary is the only guy from the 2022 draft class that has a secure starting majority role right now. And that's out of a lot of people. I mean, we're talking about Treylon Burks, who was drafted to be a wide receiver 1, is now wide receiver 4. We're talking about Malik Willis, who was drafted to be the potential future guy at the spot. I mean, that's why he was drafted, and he's now probably not even going to make the team 2 years later. You know, NPF does not have a secure written in stone spot on the offensive line. I think a lot of people are overestimating that he is. I think he's going to get a shot at it, but the fact that a lot of people want to act like it's written in Sharpie. It's written in very light, easily erasable pencil.
I agree.
And you keep on going down that list. Hassan Haskins, maybe he gets a bump. Randy Jordan called him the enforcer. Maybe he gets a little bit of a bump there in his role. Just going through that list, Kyle Phillips may not even make the team. Chika Okonkwo's lost his grip on the starting job. Just a lot of different things have happened. And to me, this is not when I say this, I'm not saying this about every player that was drafted, because I do not think that every player that was drafted by John Robinson, it falls under this category. But we've heard Rand Carthon talk about drafting players that just absolutely are full force love fucking football. They love football, right? John Robinson talked about that same thing. Yeah. John Robinson did not follow through on his promise to get those guys. He did not draft guys that love football. For the most part, the majority of the guys that he drafted have fallen out of the league, have fallen back, and never lived up to their draft stats because they never wanted to put in the work, never put in the effort, and just did not love football. What you're seeing, Skoronski, who came back bigger, tougher, stronger. You're seeing Josh Wiley looking a lot better, coming back and taking a more commanding role. Tajay Spears doing the same. They put in the work in the offseason. You know who puts in the work in the offseason? Good players that love football. And at this point, I think you're seeing a quick turnaround of a draft class paying dividends. And they're never going to be probably the 2019 draft class of the Tennessee Titans, which was a really dang good draft class. But this will probably end up being, this 2023 draft class may end up being the second best draft class in just his second year of being on the field.
And honestly, I need to include Levis,
yes,
in that conversation as well, coming back and putting himself in a situation to be very successful. I think there are more questions that revolve around the quarterback position that make it more complicated. But if you go through that list, Burks was the first rounder, McCreary was the second rounder, then it was MPF, and then Willis, I believe, the 2/3. Mm-hmm. You've got Haskins, Chig, Phillips as well. Here's what I'd say. Like, I completely agree with your basic point, because I think Chig and Phillips and Malik Willis, even, for example, and McCreary, I think they love football. I just don't think Willis is good enough. I don't think Phillips can stay healthy. I do think, but I think your point. I think MPF right now, to your point, a penciled in starter, and McCreary definitely a starter. But other than that, even if Chig is a contributor and Phillips is a contributor and Haskins is the third running back and Burks is a contributor, we are talking about third and fourth string players by and large in that draft class. And McCreary's the only true starter. I think there's a chance that two of them are starters. And then I think, if you're running two tight ends, there's a good chance Chig is starting as well. But that's, again,
but when you're talking about a team that's theoretically going to run probably 60% out of 11 personnel in both passing and running, you're not going to see Chig, right? I mean, like, that's the thing. Yeah. Chig's snap count should theoretically, on the current trend, really decline precipitously compared to the other previous two seasons. And I think people are just going to have to kind of wrap their head around this idea, because I've seen a lot of people like, well, he'll be the big slot, so he'll just won't be, on inline and stuff. They're not going to take Tyler Boyd off the field to put Chig Okonkwo out there, more than likely. No. So, like, it's kind of falls into the Traylon Burks categories that we have to kind of reassess. Maybe this is a good segment, to have in the summer. Reassess everybody's roles and reset expectations for how much you'll actually see them on the field. Yeah. Now, listen, Josh Whyle has to stay healthy, right? And if Josh Whyle can't stay healthy, Chig steps up. And guess what? That's I'm still fine with that. I think Chig is an underrated run blocker. He had a really good year last year. Pass blocker, obviously, you don't really want him, but you also probably don't need him this year, technically, to be a pass blocker. You need him to be a vertical threat or a seam threat or yards after catch threat. That's what you need him. But the problem is that right now, Josh Whyle has the chemistry with Will Levis because of their year last year in the offseason, where they're practicing mainly with each other while Chig is practicing with the first team. Again, I think Chig's really talented. I think he's totally deserving. If this all ends up being just Josh Whyle fluff, and we have bought into something that's not really happening, and Chig is the starting tight end one,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Guess what? That is still great. That's still great for the team. That's great for Chig. That's a positive mark on the draft class, and that's still good for Josh Whyle, who can still be a contributor for this offense.
And I think Chig loves ball, honestly. Like, I think he likes football a lot. I think he's a very smart player. He works really hard. I think he sort of has some physical limitations. He's just not a big guy. But otherwise, I think he's very talented, very dynamic, can do a lot of things, and loves the game and works really hard and is a smart player. So, but I agree, on the whole, this is sort of the group of players that we've talked about all summer, that it's like, if the team is going to go from 6 wins to 9 wins, they need these house money guys. And there's some guys that are a little bit older draft picks, but like, this is a group that if you get a full 17 out of Kyle Phillips and MPF and Traylon Burks, then the offense is going to be better. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
So here's a good, Stoney, you've been banned for at least 8 more minutes. You've got you got a couple more segments you need to sit out. Ed Henry says, is it a fair fight? Doesn't the player who was drafted by the current GM of any team have a leg up in head-to-head competition? My answer to that is no, because if you are good enough, that's all that matters. If you can help the new regime win football games and execute plays in a successful way, who gives a shit how you got to the roster? Like, it does not matter. They are going to be loyal, I would hope, to the person that gives them the best chance to win. Full stop.
I mean, look at Jack Gibby. There you go.
They're too loyal.
Yeah, they're too loyal. I mean, they brought back NWI, who doesn't have who technically wasn't a Rand Carthon guy. They have guys on the roster that are not Rand Carthon guys. Roger McCreary would be one of them. Like, if this was the case, if they wouldn't be loyal to Roger McCreary, JBL would be getting more reps, right, over Roger McCreary. But at the end of the day, a good GM isn't going to put just his guys out there if the other guy is good.
Yeah,
that's how you get fired. Now, does that mean that guys like, let's say that Malik Willis was the starting quarterback? Okay, let's just hypothetical. Malik Willis, and they drafted a guy in the 4th round. They drafted Spencer Rattler. Okay, if Malik Willis sucks, the GM, who is not loyal and did not draft Malik Willis, is going to pull Malik Willis and put in Spencer Rattler. Going to put in his guy. But the difference, the thing is, there's a short leash for that particular player. is there? I don't know of anybody that maybe has a short leash that maybe NPF would have the shortest leash out of all previously drafted players.
Are you saying that Rand Carthon hates Chigakonkwo? Is that what you're saying? That's why
I
Josh Wiley's getting the run?
I just think Josh Wiley's getting the run because I think he fits the offense more as far as being able to be kind of a dual threat. So
yeah. All right. Number 2, and I've got an exercise that I don't know will like put Titans fans into therapy. Maybe I don't know, but I got an exercise to illustrate my point here, which is that last year there was a lot of talk by a lot of people about how the offensive line was going to be improved. I never bought it, and I think on this show I continually asked, why is Andre Dillard people think he's the answer? And I not that I saw how bad he was going to be coming. That's not what I saw, but I was always walking around going like, they've got their group, but I don't know if they look definitively better. Like I never once bought into that. I do believe that the offensive line will be significantly improved this year. How much better? I don't know.
It's going to be like it's just there's just too much. I mean, I don't think that's a bold take or anything.
But
let's general consensus.
No, I agree. But let me do the exercise here because it was when I did this, I like stopped and I was like, oh shit, it was like a light bulb moment. And shout out to Nick Suss from the Tennessean who he and I were talking through this and we both like looked at each other like, oh shit, that makes sense. So obviously Latham, huge upgrade at left tackle. Skoronski should be better and stronger as we've already talked about. Cushenberry, huge upgrade on Brewer. You got a battle going on at right guard and right tackle. But here's the exercise that really cemented. And Bill Callahan, as the coach, should have a huge impact on all of this. So everything on paper is great. But let me ask you a question. If I told you had Leroy Watson at left tackle, Lachavious Simmons at left guard, Daniel Brunskill at center, Dylan Radins at right guard, and Jalen Duncan or John Ojukwu at right tackle, I could argue in theory, those are the 5 backups on this team. I could argue that is as good as some of the lineups they put out last year.
Probably over the last 2 years. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I talked about it on Stack 'Em Inbox, and we talked about on Football and Other F Words yesterday. This is the best 1 through 10 offensive linemen. So like, however you may want to stack them up, the top 10 offensive linemen on this team out of the 16 that they currently have signed, including Jerron Christian. This is the best collection of offensive linemen. They may not be the best starting 5 that Tennessee Titans have seen in a long time.
Sure.
This is the best depth that they have had at the position. And so I do think the offensive line will be much improved. I do not think Lachavious Simmons is going to be making the roster, but that'll be neither here nor there. But I do think that when we talked about like this, there's so many guys that can play multiple positions. Daniel Brunskill could play from center to right tackle. Dylan Radins can play. I guess they're cross training him to be a center, but he can also play right tackle. We know he can play right guard, left guard, and if he's the third left tackle option, he's the third left tackle option. We know Jerron Christian can play both. Leroy Watson could probably play both. Jalen Duncan is probably the odd man out at this point. But when you have that many backups, right? That many backups that can play multiple spots on top of whether it's Ojukwu or NPF at right tackle, because if it's Ojukwu, well, NPF could play both tackle spots, right? So you have guys that can play both tackle spots. And so to me, I look at it like, okay, it's not a death sentence anymore if one offensive lineman goes down. It may not even be a death sentence if 2 offensive linemen go down in a season, because Bill Callahan has shown that he's able to put in a Leroy Watson, a Jerron Christian, and they're able to do NFL average work in a pinch. And so I think when you have a guy like maybe Dylan Radins, who's a little bit better, Daniel Brunskill, who can fill in a couple spots, he's got this athleticism and the smarts. Like when you have all these guys, your offensive line should be able to find success and avoid a considerable drop off if they see injuries on the offensive line and certain players are not able to be out there for a game or 2.
It's funny, like how many times did Brunskill, I think, started 14 games. Radins and Duncan certainly played a lot. I'm sort of pulling up. Radins started 11 games last year. Ojukwu started 3. Duncan started 5. Brunskill started 14. So, like, honestly, I mean, those are the backup. You did have a backup offensive line last year.
Yeah.
And I think the backup offensive line this year, I think you could argue was as good as the starting line was at times last year. And that, to me, was the thing that, like, I already, like, to your point, it's obvious. It should be better. They invested. When you invest this much stuff 2 years in a row, 2 top 12 picks, 2 top 11 picks, you should be significantly improved. But, like, it just crystallized for me because last year I didn't feel like it was there yet. And it turned out that was the case. And this year, it feels different. To your point, there's more depth, there's more talent, there's more versatility, there's more high-end left tackle talent, no question. And, of course, some younger players developing. So that was my top 2 are, I think, some young players. And there's no question that Bill Callahan is like the bow that ties it all together for sure. So, all right, number 2 for you.
My number 2 is that I think the Titans are going to get the best version of Calvin Ridley. He's put in the work. He's been a tremendous leader and asset, at practices. You see him constantly talking to people, talking to Will Levis, talking to Traylon Burks. He's doing everything that you want to see from that standpoint. But when you talk about his speed, he's a year removed from being a year and a half removed from the league. So I think a lot of people are just like, well, last year he had a 1,000-yard season. He wasn't really on the same page. He may not ever be a high-end one. I understand that logic, but it's similar to an ACL tear. Being out of the league for a year and a half and trying to be back in football shape and playing the game of football, it's not like riding a bike. You can ride the bike pretty well, but it's not going to feel as comfortable as you are the second year. We're getting the Calvin Ridley on the field on Sundays that is essentially a year removed from an ACL tear. I think that we're getting a guy who was the second team All-Pro guy who went for 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns a couple of years ago. Well, now it feels like a little bit longer than that. But that guy is the guy you're going to get. You're going to get that talent. Now, does he reach those marks in this offense with Will Levis? I don't know. Will Levis is right. Different than Matt Ryan, right?
Yep.
And all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of a crowded room. I'm sure Calvin Ridley had Julio, but, Calvin Ridley now has multiple people to contend with. So at the end of the day, what Calvin Ridley, he may not be 1,300 yards, but I think what you're going to see is a considerable improvement over Jacksonville guy, Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be used correctly. He's going to be used in multiple ways, and he is just fast. And to me, there's just, when you talk about speed and deep speed, I feel like the Titans are going to get the best out of Calvin Ridley, and he's probably going to put up one of his most efficient, best years as a pro. And really, if this team kind of wins and hovers around the top of the AFC South and stays relevant, it may not end in like an 11-win season or playoff appearance. I think we're going to see a couple of Pro Bowlers from this team, and I think we'll at least see 1 or 2 All-Pro guys, because I think Lloyd Cushenberry, to go back to the previous subject, Lloyd Cushenberry is a guy that you should put on the All-Pro Pro Bowl radar. I think Calvin Ridley is another one, L'Jarius Sneed, Jeffrey Simmons, all these guys. We talked about this last year. How many Pro Bowlers do you have? How many All-Pro guys do you really have? How many dudes? Guys? You have a bunch of dudes. You have a bunch of dudes who are in a good situation to really make some waves and get some recognition for the Tennessee Titans.
It's high-end players at how many positions? And last year they had basically none at any. Other than
Jeffrey Simmons and Derrick Henry.
And now it feels like you've got a couple of high-end pieces at wide receiver, certainly one high-end corner, a great high-end defensive tackle. Like, you started to see some high-end dudes, and that's what you need. And I agree, like, he's played 66 career games. If you divide that by 16, I know the season's 17 now, but if you divide it by 16, that's 4 and some change. That's 4 seasons of football he's played. And so in Atlanta, he was young. He was inexperienced. He was growing. In Jacksonville, he was coming off of an injury and playing in a system that we don't really love all that much. And so he's really in his prime right now, Calvin Ridley is. And I think you could argue maturity, health, age, experience, wisdom, and system are all they've all come together to what could be his best 2 seasons. I would say the next 2 years. The biggest question in all of that from a production standpoint is the quarterback, is Will Levis. That's does he get him the football as often as he should and in the right spots? That's what matters about Ridley's stats. Otherwise, I think he is going to be in a position to be very successful a lot this year. So I agree with you. That's a big one. Ultimately, so I saw this. I saw a video. I don't know if you've seen this. There was I can't remember where I saw it. There was an article I was reading about quarterbacks, and there was a link in there about it showed all of Trevor Lawrence's almost touchdowns and like how many times Trevor Lawrence dropped a dime and like a guy missed by like half an inch with his foot or dropped a pass or it was knocked away. And I couldn't believe how many there were. And maybe you could do that for every quarterback. I don't know. But there were a lot of Calvin Ridley, like 1 foot misses or drops or whatever. And I'm like, that's not a good highlight package. Just not to I'm not pouring cold water on your argument because I agree with it. But you should, if you can find it, go seek it out for you folks that think Trevor Lawrence is terrible. Zach.
He is. And he's very average. I don't think he's terrible. He's just terrible compared to what everybody thought he was going to be.
I think at 24 years old, Lawrence is going to develop even better. So I'm doubling down on the argument. But Calvin Ridley will be in a better system in this system with a better number one on the other side to help take away coverage, and is more mature and more equipped and healthier to be a leader in the offense than ever before in his career. And I think you are right. We are going to get the best Calvin Ridley. The question is, does Will Levis maximize his talents? That's the question. All right. So that's 2. Here's my third one. There are major depth questions on this defense.
Well, now that's still in mind. Yours was still major questions up middle of defense.
Yes. Okay.
And
fine.
For Levis,
fine.
You're still in mind. That is mine.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I was taking all I did was remove Levis from that because I think all the questions about Levis we've covered a million times, so I don't really need to. I feel like we don't need to do that. It is up you're right. It's depth because I was trying to remove corners from the arrangement. We don't need corners to talk about corners, but we did not see Kenneth Murray on the field much at all. We did. This is just the media. We don't know what happened.
Hopefully
in private.
That's a trend for the whole season.
Set you up on that one. you got to take your swings. Did not see Cedric Gray on the field much at all. You basically Hooker and Molden is all you trust right now at safety, and up the middle you did not see Tavondre Sweat or Jeffrey Simmons one time. I'm not doubting their talent, and then you can include depth at the edge as well if you want to, which I know you're going to do. But there are major depth questions at a lot of spots on this defense. And that is a concern. That should be a concern. I gave you 2 positive ones and 1 very big negative one. And so I'm trying to be as balanced as possible. But every practice we were out there, when you're looking at Matt Jackson and Brown and Shaheem Carter, and you're going like, okay, you're looking at linebackers and it's Gibbons and Wallow. You're like, what are we doing? Like the pass rusher, if you're going to rank the pass rushers, as we did on the show last week, like 1 to 5, Landry, Key, Weaver, question mark. Like there's a lot of pieces that I'm concerned about on the defense, and most of it is up the middle right now, and that's a concern. If I'm
cornerbacks aside, okay, cornerbacks aside, depth on defense is still pretty bad, and. Like I said it when since you've stolen my idea.
I didn't steal it. We're working together.
Since you've taken credit for my idea.
I'm not taking
I said anything right now, and anything right now to improve that depth is like putting a Band-Aid on a hole at the Hoover Dam. Because you sign Carl Lawson, well, that doesn't really fix anything if Harold Landry goes down. Because I mean that's just as bad, if not worse, right? And if you sign one of these no-name linebackers that are still out there, like I saw Andre Smith, I think his name was Andre Smith, former Falcons linebacker, which Frank Bush would know, signed with someone else. That's about as good as your linebackers are going to be. Now, listen, there's a big opportunity at safety, and this is something that me and Stoney talked about yesterday because a lot of people are like, when they talk bad about safety, they're lumping in Elijah Molden with the depth. And I don't think that's fair to Elijah Molden. Because right now, Elijah Molden is your starter. And if he were asked to start the year and be the starter for the year, that is, you have an average safety and you should have no problem with that.
I agree.
Now, can you improve upon Elijah Molden with Justin Simmons? Absolutely. And does signing Justin Simmons solve two problems at safety? Absolutely. It fixes you have an upgrade at starter, and you push Elijah Molden down, which means that your depth is now better. It's not great, but it is better, because if Justin Simmons goes down, then here you go. You got Elijah Molden coming in, right?
And you can be more flexible with Molden, who could back up
Right.
other spots too. So
Exactly. So it actually does help in that regard. But also, I think Tennessee Titans fans have to kind of take this Marcus May signing with the Dolphins and view it like this. Whether he gets paid $4 million or $10 million, the Tennessee Titans didn't think that it was that the talent and difference between Marcus May and Elijah Molden was worth outbidding the Dolphins for. So that should tell you how highly they think of Elijah Molden. And I think it's rightfully so, because we've always thought that Elijah Molden, coming out of the draft class, was a damn good prospect. He was smart. He may not be athletic, but he was smart, and he knew what to do. He knew what spot to be in, and all that kind of stuff. He learned a new position last year, and when Kevin Byard left and he stepped in and split time with Kayvon Wallace, whenever he was on the field at the safety position, he was doing some good things out there. You never hardly heard his name called, and sometimes that means that the safety's doing their job. So in my mind, in this particular defense that relies on brain power, it relies on being in the right space, being at the right spot, being on time, being physical, which is something that Elijah Molden is really good at, just as much as Roger McCreary is. He's really good at being physical. All these things, to me, Elijah Molden can be that. But if Elijah Molden goes down and they are sticking with Shaheem Carter, Mike Brown, and I think it's Anthony Kendall or Matt Jackson or whatever, that's terrible. That is a considerable drop off. There's a bigger drop off from Elijah Molden to those guys than Justin Simmons to Elijah Molden at this point. Like, that's kind of how I feel.
Yep.
And so at this point, and you look at the depth, if Harold Landry goes down, hell, even if Arden Key goes down, I think the drop off from Arden Key to even Rashad Weaver isn't that great. And then you talk about the defensive line. Keandre Coburn, I mean, you have a good three. You have Tavondre Sweat, you have Jeffrey Simmons, and you have Sebastian Joseph Day. But let's be honest here. If Tavondre Sweat's injury is a soft tissue injury, the chances that he's going to re-injure that throughout the year is probably pretty high. So you're going to have the Keandre Coburn step up and Isaiah Iton step up. That's not great. Like, the depth, and then we've talked about linebacker and the issues there ad nauseum. But the only place they have depth is cornerback, and they have really good depth. And I get that. I guess their idea is that it starts with the cornerbacks, and they're going to work their way down. And the cornerbacks, they're so good, they trickle down to all these average defenders turning into slightly above average defenders, or a bad defender turns into a good one, because it's a trickle down effect from the coverage. But if you got Elijah, like I said, if Imani Hooker, Elijah Molden go down, if Harold Landry or Arden Key go down, if Jeffrey Simmons goes down, who has not finished the season the last two, or has been playing through injuries the last two seasons, if Tavondre Sweat, who has a lower body injury according to PK, if he re-injures himself, those are really big depth issues that whoever you get to get those guys at this point in the game to mitigate that, unless it's Justin Simmons, you're looking at Eddie Jackson. And I know he has the name recognition, so everybody just assumes he's great. You're looking at guys like Kyle Pecco and Keandre Coburn and TK McClendon and Quentin Bohanna, who's not even a real person. Like, you're looking at Rashad Weaver and Thomas Rush and maybe Caleb Murphy and Jalen Hare. Like, these guys do not inspire confidence. And to me, the defense is going to be great as long as everybody stays healthy. Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, you're like a couple of plays away from TK McClendon and Jalen Harrell being like 2/5 of your starting defensive line.
Right.
And that's not a place you want to be. Jalen Harrell, by the way, I think is like probably, as we talked about, fourth probably on your pass rush behind Weaver and Key and Landry. So I think Harrell has had a good summer. But again, you're asking a late round rookie to be your number 4 pass rusher. Like, that's not a good place to be. And we don't even have to talk about the linebackers. I think how they I would have loved to have seen how they used the linebackers when the media wasn't around. Like that's probably the one area that I think is just sort of really curious from a strategy standpoint. But we've already talked about that, so I don't need to go any deeper into that. So it's up the middle of the defense. There is no depth, and there are major questions with not just the depth, but also the starters, other than like Jeffrey Simmons, basically, and maybe Amani Hooker. I personally like Elijah Molden. I've always liked him. I think the first day at practice of his rookie camp, I was like, this guy knows ball. Like he cares about ball. He's physical. He's a good tackler. I think I've always enjoyed Elijah Molden as a player, even if he doesn't fit perfectly into a specific role. So, all right. So those are our overarching takeaways, themes that we learned about the team through the course of the summer. Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group are two great and amazing, wonderful local sponsors, locally owned businesses, always local, buy local, support local, keep those dollars in the community. They go a lot further when you spend money with people who live in your community. So check out Sinkers Beverages for all your beer, your wine, your booze, your non-alcoholic beverages. They got a huge selection of non-alc stuff. So if you're on that train, congrats, good for you. Go swing by Sinkers. They got something for you. Bluegrass Beverages, their sister store up in Hendersonville. Follow them on the socials as well. They do all kinds of like Friday afternoon bourbon allocation drops, but you got to be watching on the socials to know when that happens. So give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram primarily. And of course, Bluegrass Beverages as well, same deal. And then sign up for the two loyalty programs, the In Crowd at Sinkers Beverages and the Bob program up there at Bluegrass. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Just remember that name. You ever need anything with your house, any problems with your house, remodeling, selling, buying, etc., looking at a house you might want to buy, just have a conversation with the Kingston Group, build that relationship with them. I promise you that relationship will pay off. I promise you. Okay, so I had a few conversations about this at the last practice we were available to see, and I just occurred to me that I think it's the most under-covered, under-talked about, underrated storyline in kind of all of the NFL, but certainly with the Tennessee Titans, and that is kickoff coverage and kickoff return. And I don't think anyone at the Titans or any other franchise in the NFL has a real grasp of what the strategies are going to be like. It is going to be a shit ton of trial and error all throughout the course of the first half of the NFL season. And what I think is going to be fascinating is going to be the creativity. Someone is going to come up with the strategy. So, Zach, should we lay out real quickly some of the new rules just in case people don't know all the details?
Lay them out.
So quickly. You have to have a maximum of 2 returners in the quote landing zone, which is from the 20 to the 0, right? From the goal line to the 20-yard line. That is where the kick has to land. You have all of your defensive, your attacking players, your coverage players will have to have at least 1 foot on the 40-yard line in plus territory on the other side of the 40. You kick off from the 35 like normal. The kicker can't cross the 50 until the ball is caught. Nobody can move until the ball is caught. And at least 7 return team members have to have a foot in between the 30 and the 35. So you're going to have 17 players of the 22 on the field within a 10-yard space between the 30 and the 40-yard line of the receiving team. Once the ball touches the ground or a return man catches it, all hell's going to break loose. And we have no idea what strategies. And I asked somebody, we were walking around and I said, could you see somebody like directionally kicking into the left corner and then peeling back players from the right coverage side to cover kicks? And people are like, sure. sure that could happen. We have no idea what is going to be good. And from reading the rules, what sounds like, if you can get the ball to land and bounce into the end zone, the touchback is on the 20. If the ball is caught in the end zone and he downs it, the ball is brought out to the 30. So there's also some strategy in where you want the ball to land as a kicker, but hang time doesn't matter anymore. It's not important, right? Because hang time is just not a factor because there's no time. It starts when the ball hits the ground or is caught. And what I think you're going to see from all teams, including the Titans, and I'm not going to use, well, maybe I'll use some names. We'll see what I can get away with here. I think the running back position has a more valuable skill set in the return game than the receiver position. Vision and lanes and cutting back is now more important because it's going to feel more like a run blocking play than a return play. And I don't think anyone has a clue how this part of the game is going to affect outcomes. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, I think we talked about it off air before we went live. Was like, I don't think anybody's going to know what's going on until week 8. Like, I think yes, in theory, I think you're right. Running backs should feel like a running play, but then we'll probably get like 2 weeks into the season. We're like, okay, they should probably put Traylon Burks back there because Traylon Burks, has a little bit of speed, a little bit of strength, blah blah blah, stuff like that. Like, I think it'll be interesting to see how it keeps changing and evolving. And in my mind, if I were doing the depth chart, or if I was the special teams coach, I think that'd be the easiest way to put it. Traylon Burks would be the guy that I'd be primarily having back there. That's me. I get that people like the idea of Tajay Spears back there, but personally, if I was the special teams coach, I'd be telling Callahan, I'd be like, hey, we don't need to put Tajay Spears back there. We got Traylon Burks. We got Jaquan Jackson, who's a little bit smaller. We'll try Dylan Johnson. We'll try Hassan Haskins. We'll try some of these other guys. Keiris Jackson, who had some opportunities as well. We'll try these guys. And the reason we'll try these guys is I don't want Tajay Spears taking any hits that he doesn't have to take. Let's keep him fresh. That's how I would do it. Now, does that mean that, okay, in week 3, I don't have to adjust? Because right now, I don't think anybody has a plan set in stone. And except for maybe Kansas City's special teams coach, Dave Taub, who's one of the best special teams coaches in the league. He may have a plan, or he'll have a plan by week 1 at least. But I don't think anybody's going to be really set in stone on these kickoff rules because nobody knows what to expect. How many players get injured? What's the best strategy? Who's kicking, right? Because a lot of teams have been talking about that their field goal kicker and their normal kickoff kicker isn't going to be the one kicking. I would assume Nick Folk is, because Nick Folk probably fits really well into this mold of what you need. A guy that can kind of turn it off and on no matter whatever you call on. But I've seen a lot of people are not even, they may do their punter on the kickoff and stuff like that. Like, it's going to be very interesting.
Well, so a couple of strategies hit me rereading the rules, which is I don't think you want. So if you are intentionally kicking the ball to land, because if you kick it a bunch of, like, there's no value in hang time. All that does is benefit the return team because then they can see the ball. The returner has time to get underneath it and make a smart, easy catch. So hang time is out the window. What's interesting is going to be, because the ball is not round and does not
right.
and does not bounce true. It's going to be fascinating to see, because I think the goal is going to be to get it to try to hit the ground, but it has to hit the ground between the goal line and the 20. Otherwise, it's like the ball went out of bounds, unless it goes into the end zone or out the back of the end zone. But if it lands short of the 20, you're on the 35. Goes out of bounds, you're on the 35. So you have to land it in the quote landing zone. And the question is going to be, can you directionally do it to get it into the end zone, or can you put it on a rope and get it to bounce funny into the end zone? Because then you give your team a chance to get down there and either recover it, force them to down it, which then the ball comes out to the 20. So the skill is no longer big booming kicks, unless you just want to kick it out the back of the end zone, and that's where you're like, you know what, screw it, we're not messing with this. We're going to go out the back of the end zone every time. And that could happen. We'll give it to you on the 30. Like, that could happen. But I think from a return standpoint, because I think coverage is always interesting, but from a return standpoint, I think, because we did not see it one time. We had 4 weeks of practice. We probably had 8 or 9 availabilities. Rookies, mandatory, OTAs. I missed one of the entire availability, and I did not see them do kickoff, return, or coverage one time. I don't think they did it, and I think there's a reason why they didn't show anything. Now, if I was guessing who was back there, let's say informed speculation, Zach.
Okay.
The 3 players you named first are the 3 players I think that are going to be deployed first. I think you nailed it. Traylon Burks, Tajay Spears, Jaquan Jackson. I think you nailed it. If I had to guess, those would be the 3. And I think Spears and Burks are your top 2. And again, you can have 2 guys back there.
Right.
You don't need to, but you might as, you can. Otherwise, you're putting another guy up into that, whatever that zone is called, the between the 30 and the 35. They're all called like Like they have a zone name now. Everything's got a zone. So I just think it's going to be I am genuinely interested from a football standpoint, from a nerd standpoint, from a Titan standpoint, from my own team standpoint, what other teams are doing. I can't wait to see what it looks like.
Well, that's like going to be the big topic, right? Heading into training camp. I assume that everybody may be even saving this for training camp, but like what does this look like? Because you guys are right. Nobody's really talked about. Nobody's really seen it.
Nope.
That will be the big unveiling. It's like they're taking, it's like the Apple iPhone reveal or whatever, which just looks like the previous 14 iPhones.
Right.
I mean, the reveal for that Apple iPhone might as well just be here's the 14. Now we're calling it the 15. Look, see this 15? It's the same as the 16. Like it's just always the same. But that is what it's all about. Like to me, the most curious thing that we don't really know about, like we kind of know how the right tackle, right guard's working. We kind of know what the linebackers are doing. We know the wide receivers. We know this. We know a lot about, in general, what the situation is for everything except for special teams. We know Nick Folk and we know Ryan Stonehouse if he's healthy. We know nothing else.
And we don't even know when Ryan Stonehouse is going to be able to play.
Right.
And again, to be very clear about this, I've talked to some people around the league. Like, this is not just a Titans thing. No one has any clue. It's why no one's showing anything at any camp. And Seattle, by the way, great news. Seattle coming to town to practice, I think, is one of my favorite things that I've learned about the Titans in the last week. I can't wait for that. It's going to be great. I'm curious to see what they do then. Are they gonna do they both feel like it's in their best interest to practice against another team and actually do this drill?
I think so. I think that's why I believe the Rams have 3 joint practices scheduled. If I'm not mistaken, and I think it's because you have to hammer out the special teams, and because nobody knows what the hell they're doing. I just feel like nobody knows what the hell they're doing, and it's kind of exciting. It's exciting.
So what's to your point? Someone is gonna have like, it'll be like week 1 or 2, and they'll have figured out one trick, and then like the next guy on another team is gonna figure out the second trick, and then the third guy on a third team is gonna figure out how to cover that first trick. And it's just going to be this chess match back and forth the entire year. And you're probably going to have big swings in strategy from team to team, which I think is going to be super interesting. Like, again, my brain goes to, if I'm trying to return kicks, I want a running back with a little bit of speed who knows how to slash, because it's about picking your lane, which block. It's almost like a zone blocking scheme at that point. Like, that's what you want, is pick your lane, find the cutback, and go. You don't need elite 4.4, straight line speed. You just want to pick up a big chunk of yards, get to about midfield. And if I'm on defense, what I'm worried about is when you bring that zero blitz on 3rd and 1 and they pop it, there's nobody in the backfield to stop him, right? Like on those 3rd down plays, a lot of times you see those safeties roll up and they come up and all of a sudden you get one block. There's nobody in the secondary to stop your running back and he breaks off a long one. That you don't want that to happen from a coverage standpoint. So are you going to, again, I think, do you directionally kick it to the left side and then on the right side of your coverage team peel those guys back to create a second layer? That's where my brain immediately went, was you got to create a second layer of coverage as like safety valves. And so again, that's just it's going to be so much fun to watch. I'm sure there's going to be moments where you're a fan and you're going to watch somebody do something for the Titans. You're going to be like, holy shit, that was so stupid. And then you might see the next play on the next game and you're going to be like, that was incredible. Do that again. Like, there's going to be big swings and big adjustments. But it's going to be so fun. And I don't think anyone's talked about it. I don't think the Titans coaching staff has talked about it. But I know that no one in the league really has like, they've got guesses and they've got strategies and all this other stuff, but like, they don't really know how it's going to play out. Like, nobody does. And that's fun.
Knows.
It's fun.
I love it.
Yeah. Super fun. All right. So there you go. Young players stepping up. The offensive line clearly better. The best of Calvin Ridley. Major depth questions up the middle of the defense and at a lot of positions. I still think, the biggest one is going to be Will Levis, but we've covered it so much we don't need to talk about it. Processing and accuracy. That's what it's about with Will Levis. Processing and accuracy. And I'll say this. I'll leave you guys on a high note. They're in the red zone drill. The defense, real hyped up, coming off last week's practice where they were really good in the red zone and in 7-on-7. Basically broke it down with like, come get some, bitch, or something like that. They were very loud and yelling. On the first play, Will Levis hits Nick Westbrook-Akine for a touchdown on a design, like on the design, in time, and on time and in rhythm. And Westbrook-Akine beat Jarvis Brownlee on that play, threw the football at Brownlee afterward in like a mock, like talking shit kind of way. Brownlee's getting down doing push-ups, and the offense is Will Levis punts the football into the lake. So they were having fun on that last day.
Yeah.
And Levis was doing all right, but it was not a starting defense. and it was not necessarily a starting offense either. But Levis did look better on the last day. A couple of touchdown passes in red zone. So if that's the positive note you all need and want, there you have it. So there you go. What do you got with football and other F words and stacking the inbox for folks coming up?
Sadiq Charles tomorrow. We've wrapping up our offensive line week, I guess, here at stackingtheinbox.com. And next week, I'll be diving into a little bit of the defense. I'm going to do a couple of videos for stackingtheinbox.com subscribers, kind of going a different approach on the offseason, and then I'll get back into highlighting certain different players.
There you go. Stackingtheinbox.com. Football and other F words. You got the Music City Audible, the Hot Read podcast, Paul Karski podcast. You got Sinkers Beverages. You got the Kingston Group. You got all the other great shows from the 440 Sports Network covering the Nashville Predators. Big news coming for you Nashville Predators fans, so stay tuned on that product over there on the show. You can also watch that one right here on the YouTube channel. If you are watching, give us a thumbs up on the YouTube page. It means a lot to us. It's how people find us. And, of course, if you're watching elsewhere, please share the show, podcast app, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Give us a share as well. We really do appreciate it. Otherwise, his name is Zach Lyons, and my name is Braden Gall, and we really appreciate you guys listening and hanging out with us. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.